Right then, let's take the Bros out for a little spin. Doesn't get to see much daylight nowadays, this bike, so sun's shining, even though it's about the middle of November. Thought I'd give the bike a treat. Let's get on the road. So, like I might have said at the beginning of the video, the Honda Bros doesn't really get out very often nowadays, since I've been rather distracted with A, crashing the BMW R1250R and writing that off, B, buying a KTM Adventure 390, C, riding my Kawasaki Versys 300, despite it being the middle of November just about. It's a beautiful sunny day. It's about 10 degrees Celsius, not too cold. The roads are mostly dry if you stay away from overhanging trees and that sort of thing. So I thought I'd give the bike a little run out. Now I've got to admit, the bike's not running properly. Once I get to cruising at a constant speed, like 50-60 miles an hour, the bike starts dropping onto one cylinder until I open the throttle some more. And I haven't got around to investigating that yet, to be honest with you, because I hardly ride it. But the bike deserves a bit of a tear down, I guess, over winter. Most likely it's the carburetors that need a clean. So I may do that, or I may sell the bike, because I'm hardly riding it. And I don't know whether I really want to be tearing into it again after the last time I took it to bits. But out of the 3 bikes I now own, the KTM, the Kawasaki Versys and this is the bike with the most torque now. I think there might be some occasions in a roll-on, even the KTM might struggle to kind of keep pace with this bike. And the KTM doesn't sound like this. And this bike was an emotional purchase for me about 6 or 7 years ago. I always loved the look of the Honda Bros since I first saw pictures of it in the 1990s. And it does make me happy to own one. Since it kind of needs a bit of TLC, and I don't think I'm the person to actually give the bike that TLC, it may have to go to a new owner. So that's kind of another reason for getting out on the bike. There might not be too many more opportunities to actually ride the Honda Bros. This is also the first run out with this bike with my new top box and Givey rack. You might be able to see there. I can't remember what it's called now. A Givey mono rack, wing rack, might be a mono rack. It was actually designed for CBR 600F from the early 90s, and I've had it for about, I don't know, 15 years. I think I bought it with an old CBR 600, never fitted it to that bike, and it's basically just been in a box ever since, this rack, until a few weeks ago when it suddenly occurred to me I might be able to fit it to this bike, because I've always wanted to fit a top box to this bike one way or another. Because I like a top box, I do like having a boot or a trunk on a bike. The Versys has got a rack that can take a box. I've fitted a rack to the KTM now. The BMW had a rack. Quite a few of my recent bikes in the last 10-15 years has had a rack and a top box at one point or another, so I'm glad this one's joined the club. Oh, this is, you can't ask for any more in mid-November really, weather-wise. It's lovely. Oh no. Ugh. Bloody Allen bolts come loose on this mount, and I've got no tools to tighten it. Look at that. Oh, I'm so pleased to have a top box. I just enjoy having that practicality. Now, is it just me, or has there been a real bumper crop of new bike announcements and refreshed model announcements around about the EICMA show this year? Cannot believe how many bikes there are. I don't know if I just didn't pay that much attention before in previous years. So yeah, since I haven't got the BMW anymore, I have been thinking about what big bike to go for next. The KTM isn't a stopgap, it kind of fills a role that the Kawasaki did fill. I suspect I'll be selling the Kawasaki before too long. But yeah, big bike, well, I'm really not sure what to do next for my next bike. I've kind of got two main directions I could go. And that is to go for a bike that's around about 600 to 800 cc. Basically, you know, a relatively lightweight, middleweight bike with reasonable performance. That's one option. The other option would be to go big and go crazy and go fast. I just don't know which way to go, where to spend my money. The kind of middleweight bike I've been thinking about, although one of them is bordering on litre bike size anyway, one of them is the Aprilia RS660. So I've ridden that a couple of years ago now, and basically I had a really good time on it, and I could see me owning one. It is a sporty bike, but it's not an extreme bike, you know, in terms of riding position and ergonomics, but it is sporty. So I'm a little concerned that I might get fed up with the riding position, and also its inability really to carry much luggage. But the RS660 is light, and after the BMW I do have a hankering after something that does not weigh very much. Another bike that's called a middleweight nowadays, but doesn't really fit the meaning of the word, is the KTM Adventure 890. But you can see how different that is to the RS660 Aprilia. And that kind of demonstrates how confused I am as to what bike I choose next. What I'd like about the KTM is not particularly its ability off-road, but it's long travel suspension and big tyres, and on UK roads that'll really go some way to making the ride comfortable but still capable of going quickly. By comparison, the RS660 will get bounced around, and the ride could be rather uncomfortable on our potholed and broken roads in this country. Yeah, so no right-minded person would really be trying to choose between a RS660 Aprilia and a KTM 890 Adventure, would they, really? Very different bikes. So I know, you know, some of the comments will be, well, it depends on what you want to do with a bike. Well, they'll both be spending most of their time, if not all their time, on the road. The KTM is not, I'm not going to be buying it for its dirt bike prowess, but it would be nice to have that flexibility. But I've got the KTM for going off-road, and it's much lighter and kind of more suited, I think, for off-road work, especially riding alone, which I tend to do. So yeah, they're the bikes I'm thinking in the middle rate arena. But what about going big and crazy? Well, one bike that wasn't announced at EICMA which I'm curious to find out about when it eventually gets released, is the refreshed KTM Super Duke GT. For some reason the GT model never made it, well, thus far, to the Gen 3 platform, but it's due an upgrade. It may even miss the 1290 engine altogether and go to the 1390 by the time it comes out. If they can make that engine smooth, relatively speaking, if they can match the smoothness of the BMW I owned, I'd be very tempted to buy one. But I last rode a big KTM a couple of years ago, the Super Adventure S, and it just vibrated, it thumped too much when I opened the throttle hard. I just was not a fan of the thudding vibration through the bike. But maybe the next Super Duke GT will change that, we'll see. And of course, BMW have come out with a couple of new motorbikes for 2024 basically, although they are appearing, I think, in dealers already. One of them being the R1350R GS, and the other one, which does take my fancy somewhat, is the M1000XR. The R1350R GS, in terms of performance, clearly it's a step up in several areas compared to the 1250, although there's not much wrong with the 1250 GS, to be honest with you. And I do like the fact they've managed to get the weight down to the level of my old 1250R naked bike, even though the GS has got a fairing. That is impressive. Although overall I was getting tired with the weight of my naked R model, and that's why I've been hankering after something lighter. So yeah, I think I'd need to be really quite blown away by the GS to buy another bike quite as heavy as that. Now I've got to admit, I was a little disappointed with the M1000XR, believe it or not. I was hoping for something a lot lighter than it is. Although I have to admit that my hopes and dreams for motorcycle weights are often unrealistic. Anyway, the M1000XR, not the competition pack version with the carbon wheels, I don't really need those, but the M1000XR, the cooking version, that's 227 kilos wet. And I've got to admit to be a bit disappointed with that, because it's nearly 30 kilograms heavier than the S1000RR. 30 kilos, that's a lot of weight. So that puts me off even before I swing a leg over it. However, I'm pretty sure once I do swing a leg over one and open the throttle, all my concerns about weight will melt into the background and a massive smile will appear on my face. The 1300 GS, I've seen a dyno comparison comparing it to the 1250, and I've got to say, at the top end there's a healthy increase in power. Now my 1250R, as punchy as it is, or was, down in the lower mid-range, it did, admittedly and understandably, kind of peter off at the top revs. There was no kick at the top end, which is understandable, totally. And although the 1300 power output is higher than the 1250, the shape of the power delivery looks the same. Again, understandably, there's no little kick at the top end, and I think I've been missing that in recent years, considering the bike I owned before the 1250R was the S1000 single R. Now you could say Ducati and the Multistrada V4S, not the Panigale based one that's coming out, because I haven't got that sort of money. And I think maybe the Ducati is worth a second ride. I did ride it briefly a couple of years ago. I wasn't all that impressed with the engine, frankly. It was quick but kind of somewhat featureless. Didn't really excite me, but I didn't have a long time to ride it, so maybe I was missing something and it deserves another ride. So in terms of Banzai crazy bike then, or big bike, I think the M1000XR is probably top of the list at the moment. But there's so many bikes out there, so many bikes. I've got to admit to having a fairly closed mind when it comes to the kind of bikes I like and bikes I don't. So if there's a conversation about next bikes down in the comments, which I do invite and welcome, I apologise in advance if I wind any of you up by dismissing your choices. Try me though. I might surprise myself. Oh, I forgot about another bike. I'm going to try and do a little bit of a mirror adjusting thing here. So maybe you can see me. Probably not. We'll have a go. It'll be a laugh. Yeah, there is one more bike that I forgot about. And that is the XSR 900 GP. So when the concept bike came out earlier this year at Goodwood, the DB40, I immediately liked that bike. And now the XSR 900 GP has come out, and I'm very interested to see how that rides. There is one slight, well, two concerns about that bike. Well, one concern and one disappointment. One concern is maybe the riding position is a bit sporty for me. It has got above the top yoke clip-ons, but there's still clip-ons, and they might be a little bit further away than I would like from the seat. And the other thing is, when it did first get announced, I did hope Yamaha would produce a lower fairing for it, and they have. But in my mind, they couldn't have done a worse job of that lower fairing. I don't know why it's quite as short front to back as it is, that it still exposes a lot of the engine. If it's supposed to ape the GP bikes and the sports bikes of the 80s and 90s, I don't know why they took the design decision that they did with that lower fairing. It just looks a bit rubbish, especially since Velocity Moto has actually modified an RD350 F2 fairing essentially to fit on an XSR 900, and that frankly looks quite a bit better than the XSR GP. But anyway, I've ridden the naked XSR 900 and I like it a lot. I do like it. So the XSR is pretty much, I think, on balance, the ideal next bike. So it's exciting times really for next year. Brought along by a very unfortunate situation where I've wrote off my BMW R1250R. But when one door closes, another door opens. So let's be positive about these things. See what happens next. Don't know if you can see me, probably not. But anyway, hope you've enjoyed my little ride out. Thanks for listening to my deliberations regarding my next bike. If you have any thoughts of your own, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you down there. Right, until the next video folks, take care of yourselves. Ta-da!